Hey guys, this is Comic Uno, and today I'm doing Comic Uno episode 209, and that's show where I review all the comics I read this week in one show. We go worst pick of the week to best pick of the week, and today I had a bit of a heavier week with 22 books, and let's start with number 22, which is X-Men Gold, issue 12. I'm sad to see this solo, because I do like this title a lot, and Kitty Pryde's one of my favorite characters of all time, second favorite. So I was a little disappointed to see this solo, but it was very much a focus on Kolgoth and kind of seeing his story. But I wasn't very invested in that, or the Mojo world we're gonna end up getting in the next arc, where is obviously very on the nose. We're gonna have a crossover because that's his character, but I didn't get to see enough X-Men here, and I was a bit disappointed with that. And I feel like it was so forced to get to the crossover that this kind of just ended up feeling like a filler. So X-Men Gold issue 12 gets 2 stars. Moving on to number 21, which is Batman: The Red Death. Issue 1, this is a metal tie-in and foil cover. And I felt like with this issue, we were thrusted into the story too quickly. And that's I guess, a pun to this being a Flash story. But we get to see evil Batman get the Speed Force, and we see what he does with the Speed Force. And that's kind of the story. But I also didn't really like the artwork. The reason I dropped Flash is because of the artwork. And it's the same artist, so it's very dark and a little messy in my opinion, so I didn't really like that. So I wasn't a fan with this. It just didn't get me invested of why I should care about Red Death as a villain or this event in general. I still haven't felt the connection I need. So Batman: The Red Death issue 1 gets 2 stars, and that was number 21. Alright, moving on to number 20. Also sad to see this so low, and that is Peter Parker, The Spectacular Spider-Man issue 4, where I feel like the artwork is just lacking. It's really hard to get into the story because of the lack of detail in the artwork, and also the very, very wordy dialogue, where it's more of a joke book, so it's kind of weird to see it so wordy with this book, but that's something that Chip Zdarsky tends to do with his humor books, is just bog it down with dialogue. So yeah, I wasn't feeling this issue as much. I haven't been able to get into the story because of that. It's the art in the dialogue heavy aspect of the issue, where I feel like it shouldn't be dialogue heavy, this type of book. But I do like the interactions between Peter and his sister. That's fun, and you know, we get to see the comedian back here, so that was cool. But the story is just kind of all over the place, and I think it needs to kind of find its way a bit. So I gave that 2 stars, and that is number 20. Moving on to number 19, which is Spider-Man 2 issue 3, a book that just doesn't need to happen, I don't think. It just doesn't have a direction. Because with this issue, it's about the other Miles and Kingpin, where I feel like Kingpin was just thrown in there because he's popular because of the Daredevil show. So Kingpin and other Miles becomes friends, and that's what the issue's kind of about, is just like, how do they become friends? And I'm like, do I care how they became friends? It didn't make me care about the other Miles anymore by having this story. The only, I think, forgiving thing about this issue is Sarah Pacelli's artwork. I do like the art style, but just not into the story. So Spider-Man 2 issue 3 gets 2 stars, and that is number 19. Moving on to number 18, which is Venomverse issue 3. Love the cover for this. Got Mayhem from the MC2 there, Mayday's clone in the background. But this issue, it's getting lower every issue. I enjoyed the first issue. Issue 2 was okay, and now it's just like, alright. Because the villains aren't as fleshed out, it's getting tougher to read the book. I think the poisons and this general world has to be fleshed out a bit more. It's getting a little bit more ridiculous, which again, I liked that aspect of it, but we don't even get a lot of the good character moments that we had with issue 1 or even issue 2. It just kind of falls flat this issue, because again, the world wasn't built enough, the scenario wasn't built enough, and it's kind of faltering as we get to the end. So Venomverse issue 3 gets 2.5 stars. Alright, moving on to number 17, which is Batwoman issue 7. Batwoman issue 6 I was so surprised with. That was in my top 5. I had a feeling it would only be that one issue, because we're going back to this old story with this old ex with Batwoman, who I don't really feel a connection for, so having the story be dedicated so much to the narrative, it's just not as interesting. So I just don't really care for that character, and I just don't know what direction this book is going in. So this one I gave 2.5 stars. Moving on to number 16, which is Star Wars Captain Phasma issue 2, which once again has some beautiful artwork here and really is what makes the book, especially because this book is very action driven. It's very much a slow burn of what did Captain Phasma do at this point, you know, after the events of The Force Awakens. So that's pretty much the story. Again, it's very action-driven. I want a bit more of her personality. It's very cold, so it's hard to get into it. But if you like the mission-based storylines, I think you'll enjoy this one. And again, the artwork is gorgeous. The coloring is gorgeous for this book, too, and that's what's keeping me on the book. So Star Wars Captain Phasma issue 2 gets 3 stars. Moving on to number 15, which is Green Lanterns issue 31. So Green Lanterns, I'm just kind of done with this arc, and I'm glad they are too, because I was getting done with the first Lantern, and I didn't really care about the other Lantern recruits. I just care about Baz and Jessica, and that's why it's a little higher, is because the Baz and Jessica moments are awesome here. I love the ending where they're like finally getting to Earth and they're happy and they're partners, and I love the growth of that. But everything else I didn't really care about. So, Green Lanterns issue 31 has some solid artwork. Jessica and Baz are awesome, but I'm very happy this story arc is over. So I gave that 3 stars. Moving on to number 14, which I always get these just to support new talent, and that is Millar World New Talent Annual 2017. And I liked a few of these. So I like the Empress version. We get to see what she was like beforehand and what she is, what type of character she is now. Love the artwork for that too. Kick-Ass was fun. That was a fun story where we get to see the people pretending to be Kick-Ass and how our main character deals with that. I didn't connect to Nemesis as much because I've never read Nemesis, so that was kind of harder to get into. Now, I never read Superior, but I thought the Superior short story was really well done. You got hooked by the first panel, and you didn't have to read Superior to understand the story and what was going on. So I really enjoyed that one. I did not enjoy the Super Crooks, another one I've never read, and I could not get invested into. And then let me see if there's another one. And Hook I was disappointed with, because I usually like Hook, but I feel like I mean, I know all these are filler, but there wasn't much to remember in that one. And the artwork I wasn't a fan of either, the rectangular type shaped faces and body shapes. So, overall though, I think there is enough stories here to support the book, and it's only $2.99, and just go support new talent. I think there are some good stories here. And it depends what type of fandoms you have towards the Millar works and which ones you've read. Alright, moving on to number 13, which is Invincible issue 140. Sad to see this book so low recently because I love Invincible, but I think the book has lost steam as it's going into this last arc, or in its last arc. It's just like prolonging things just to get to the end. And this issue, I was disappointed mostly because of the coloring. It was hard to see the Throg and Invincible fight because of the vicious orange coloring, which I get because they're in the sun, so you need that, but it was really hard to focus on the fight. And then the story is pretty much just Invincible telling his philosophy and Throg's telling his philosophy, and that kind of got boring really quickly. But what does make the issue is definitely the ending, where we see what happened to Invincible. Like, is he alive? Is he not? What's going on? So I like that, because that was the cliffhanger from the last issue of like, oh, what is Adam Eve reacting to? And we find out it's her husband. So I did enjoy that part, but it wasn't exactly what I wanted from Invincible, just the rest of the story. So Invincible issue 140 gets 3 stars. Moving on to number 12, and I'm glad to see this higher, and that is Cave Carson has a Cybernetic Eye issue 12. And this is a heartwarming issue where we get to see Chloe, Cave, and his wife, reconnecting and her having to leave by the end. It's like a robot version of her, and then we get to see her get her memories back. So it was a heartwarming issue where the team has to work together to try to save her, and for her to save other people to save her. So I liked it. I think it was just the right amount of weird Cave Carson should be, and I gave this one 3.5 stars, and hopefully it continues in this direction. It looks like it is going a newer direction with the next arc. Alright, moving on to number 11, which is Glitterbomb, the Fame game. In this issue, I really like the ending, because we get to see our other main character back, it looks like, because she's, looming around in a tree and killing people, and it was nice to see her, because we did switch point of views of actually the nanny being the main character now, and her obviously being addicted to fame and wanting to be famous, which is an interesting commentary. But I think what was hard for me to give this a higher grade is that she's not really likable. And I'm not saying the original character was likable either, but she was relatable. And this character is not likable or relatable. So it's kind of hard to get into her narrative compared to the original narrator. But still, that ending scene definitely makes the moment where you're like, alright, I want to see where this goes. So Glitterbomb, the Fame game, issue 1 gets 3.5 stars, and the artwork is still really good for the tone of this book. Alright, moving on to number, I think 10? Yes, number 10. I'm glad to see this a bit higher, and it's mostly because of one scene in this book, but it's Invincible Iron Man, issue 11. And mostly what makes it higher is the Mary Jane parts. I like that Mary Jane met Iron Man early in her modeling career, but the moment that really made this issue was her talking about her dad, because we don't get to see that very often in the books, and her catching on obviously really quickly that Tony is Iron Man, because obviously she knew that Peter is Spider-Man, so she's been in the superhero world for a bit, so she knew that really quickly, and Tony doesn't try lying to her. And then that moment where Tony's drinking and MJ realizes, oh, he's like my dad, so my dad was also an alcoholic, but she doesn't like straight up say that. So that moment definitely makes the issue. And then we also get to see how Riri first met Tony, which wasn't as entertaining. I feel like they tried just have Riri in the issue just because she's the main character, and I don't really think Riri needed to be here. And then the ending kind of felt like, oh, that was fast, where they're like, Tony's gone, but not dead. So I felt like that was not the best transition going into Marvel Legacy, but the MJ stuff, which is pretty much most of the issue, was definitely the most positive, and the artwork is solid for the most part until it turns into this weird anime type art. So yeah, I'm gonna give this one 3.5 stars. Definitely not the best one, but there's some good moments in this issue to put it up a bit higher. Alright, moving on to number 9, which is Superman, issue 31. Yeah, Superman is a bit higher than usual, and I love the Lois Lane storylines, and I think Lois really aced this one. The artwork is pretty good. I believe it's the same artist that did some of the Deathstroke stuff in the New 52. But I enjoyed the story. It's Lois trying to hunt for the story, and the story is Deathstroke. And by the end, you get a cliffhanger we've seen a billion times, but still interesting enough that Deathstroke looks like he shoots Lois, which I'm sure he doesn't, and shoots somebody maybe next to Lois or something. Because he says, "I'm afraid it's you, Lois, I'm hunting." So we'll see why he's doing that. But yeah, it's definitely an interesting issue. I'm glad that Lois gets the spotlight. So Superman issue 31 gets 4 stars. And that is number 9. Now we're moving on to number 8, which is Injustice 2 issue 10. And this is a fun issue. We get to see Harley finally not being on the bad side because of that bomb in her head. And she's like, alright, I'm just gonna... And I love the moment where she sacrifices herself for her daughter. She's ready to sacrifice herself, but then of course Adam is able to save her and said, I just made a guess, it was the Blue Wire. So that was fun, and they're all able to escape, and just like every Injustice issue written by Tom Taylor, all the character moments are so great of Barbara and the rest of the team trying to save the children and then actually seeing the children. And I love that ending moment where we get to see Oliver and Black Canary's son have Dinah's powers. That was a really cool panel. So I enjoyed that one. And then Harley calling him the Green Canary. So Harley was a pleasure in this issue because Tom Taylor writes Harley so well. And the artwork's gorgeous for this book too. But really solid issue. I enjoyed this one. If you're not reading Injustice 2, you totally should, because it's Tom Taylor writing the whole DC universe, which is a blast. So I gave that one 4 stars. Alright, moving on to number 7, which is Batman issue 31, and Batman, it was still a bit of a slower arc, slower burn with the war of jokes and riddles, but it looks like it's almost done. And I like that we're finally getting to the answer why Batman's telling this story to Catwoman, and what happened in the room between Joker, Riddler, and Batman when 2 or 3 mentally insane people, he said, or 3 people that aren't normal get into a room together. So it was a nice cliffhanger. Also, I liked Kite Man a lot. He tries to trick everybody and then he ends up dying. So that was a interesting Kite Man moment for what Tom King has been building up with this character. And the artwork is gorgeous for this book too. So really, really solid book. I love the structure of it. I mean, King really does the structure of these books really well, and has a lot of clever moments in the narrative. So I'm going to give Batman issue 31 a solid 4 stars. Moving on to number 6, I want to see this in my top 5, but there's a good solid top 5 this week. But Snotgirl issue 7 makes number 6. And Snotgirl, I mean, I'm so glad this book is back on track, where we get to see even more that Lottie, our main character, is probably not a reliable narrator, because we see Charlene, who is the stalker who was about to die and was pushed off a building by Cool Girl, is starting to remember things. And she also remembers that at the party in the first issue, that Cool Girl was pretty much dead. At least there was blood next to her body. So why is Cool Girl still existing? Did Cool Girl ever exist? And it's this really interesting reality mixed with, you know, kind of social media created figment of your imagination. So it's a really interesting commentary on social media, as we get to see Lottie get even more paranoid because her friends are starting to learn that she has allergies, but I think she has bigger problems than allergies. And I love the characters. I really like the commentary this book is going for. It's a really solid issue. So Snotgirl issue 7 gets a solid 4 stars. Moving on to number 5, which is The Amazing Spider-Man Renew Your Vows issue 11. And this is a really powerful issue where we get to see Annie has been kidnapped, and MJ and Peter obviously are very angry. And they go their separate ways to find out what happened. So we get to see Peter's really angry fighting Rhino, but who really goes at it is Mama Bear, is MJ, where she's like, alright, it's Liz Allen, I know it's Liz. And her going up against Liz to say, take this stupid thing off my body, because she still has a symbiote, I don't want it, and where's my kid? And it's such an interesting moment, because obviously MJ knows this is Liz Allen. This is someone she's known for a very long time, but Liz does not know this is MJ, and it makes her a really interesting scene. And then her, you know, Liz also not completely caring for her son, and you wonder, like, how does she get to this point? And that's why Normie's kind of going all crazy. So, and then we see that Normie's building this ultra Green Goblin suit. But also even the Normie and Annie scenes are really cool. It kind of feels very Spider-Girl, though, which I always say. There's definitely a lot of callbacks to Mayday, but we get this moment which is very similar to the Spider-Girl Normie moment in the MC2, where they're talking to each other, and you know, Annie is tied up pretty much, which happened in Spider-Girl, where May was tied up, and just talking to Normie is like, why are you doing this? Like, what's going on? And Normie kind of takes a different approach, though, than the Spider-Girl version, where he's like, oh, you know, I had to grow up. I didn't have a mom. I didn't have a dad. I'm not an adult. I'm just a person. So I enjoyed that. I really liked that scene. So really powerful stuff there. And I usually don't like Normie in this book, but I thought he was really good here. So Amazing Spider-Man Renew Your Vows issue 11 gets 4.5 stars, and that is number 5. Moving on to number 4, a book I was surprised to see here, and I'm happy to see here, which is Jean Grey issue 7. And Jean Grey has been in this pattern of just like, alright, let's have every special guest join Jean Grey. But here I felt like it was a bit more than that. Even though it was kind of special guest of the issue, it also is our Jean Grey dealing with the Phoenix Jean Grey in her head. And there's so many good moments with that, and funny moments where we get to see Jean screaming like a crazy person in the subway and everyone looking at her, and she knows everyone's looking at her. She's talked about it. She's like, I wish I could just wear my stupid earphones because I know everyone's staring at me. And then even with Scarlet Witch, she's trying to relax, and then Jean Grey's like talking to her, and Jean's trying to ignore her, but they're still talking to each other. But by the end, other Jean Grey wins. Our figment of the imagination Jean Grey, where she ends up going into Emma Frost's body. So I thought that was a pretty cool cliffhanger. So I like this. I thought we got a little bit more meat here compared to the other issues, and I really love the dynamic between Jean and Jean. So Jean Grey issue 7 gets 4.5 stars, actually. Now is my number 4. Moving on to number 3, a book I really wasn't going to pick up, but I just heard a lot of good stuff from. And I'm glad I did pick it up, and that is Bloodshot Salvation, issue 1. So I haven't read a Valiant book in a long time, because usually I can't get into Valiant stuff. It's really hard for new readers to get into it. But this book was so new reader friendly. I've never read Bloodshot in my life, but I totally got what was going on, and I love the family dynamic. So it's Bloodshot in the present, wanting a normal life, hanging out with his girlfriend, Magic, and their kid, and they're having a fun time. But we find out that Magic's father is not the best person, and she's trying to forget about it, but Bloodshot can't let it down, and Magic's like, no, don't. You're gonna put us down this downward spiral like you always do, just don't do it. And what I really like about the story, though, is that it's not just the present, it's also the future, where we get to see Magic and her daughter, who's like, I guess 5 or 6 now, and has the Bloodshot look, running away from something, and Bloodshot's not around anymore, either dead or has ran away, or maybe they think he's dead, but he's not actually dead. So it's a really interesting contrast, and yeah, it hooked me with this first issue. Again, don't know anything about these characters, but I'm invested. So, issue 1 did a good job, and I'm definitely going to be picking up more of this. So, I'm going to give that 4.5 stars, and that is my number 3. Moving on to number 2, which is Generations, Miss Marvel in Miss Marvel. Glad to see a Generations book a bit higher, and I really like this because it's Kamala remembering why she picked the Miss Marvel name in the first place. And, you know, Kamala has been on the outs with Carol. They don't forget that here. But she still realizes, like, oh, that's why I look up to Carol Danvers. And that's why we also differ. So I really like those moments. But it also has a nice commentary on feminism and how feminism is different now. So I like that aspect, too. And the artwork is so cool because it's very throwbacky, but it still feels modern with the same colorist that does the regular Kamala Miss Marvel book. So great facial expressions, and just a story where Kamala, and I would say Carol also, kind of learned from each other, which is what I want from these Generations books. So I'm going to give this one 4.5 stars. Moving on to number 1, I don't think it's a surprise, it's been my number 1 since this book has come out, and that is Go-Go Power Rangers issue 3. I love this book, and there's so much meat to it. There's so many great relationships explored. We get to see Billy and Skull, how to pass with each other. Of course, we get to see Kimberly and Matthew. I love their relationship, and Matthew, you know, figuring, oh wait, my friends are keeping secrets from me, what's going on here? And they get in a moment where Kimberly really has to think, do I tell him I'm a Power Ranger or does he die, pretty much? So it's a really interesting actual life or death situation that you would never get in the TV show. So it's an actual struggle of the secret identity, which is such a pleasant surprise with this book. But there's also really, you know, a lot of small moments I really liked here too, like Ernie's trying to have the volunteer center still open, and then you find out, oh, that's why Kimberly teaches gymnastics in the volunteer center, because they needed more people, and I'm sure they'll make that connection later in the arc. And even the small moments of Trini still having a crush on Jason, or Zach talking to Matthew. There's so many good moments in this issue and so many great relationships, but also good action of our Power Rangers defeating the putties and them pretty much being the only ones knowing that they're called putties. And Matthew's like, those things. Like, nah, they're called putties. So I like that moment too. So many great moments. I love the artwork for this book. It's expressive. It's great for the action, great for the facial expressions, and I love this creative team. So Go Power Rangers issue 3 gets 4.5 stars, and that is my #1 pick. Hopefully you guys enjoyed. This is Comic Uno and Comic Frontline. Don't forget to follow me on Twitter. Don't forget to like my Facebook page. Also, description below, there are links for my comic book, Like Father, Like Daughter. And don't forget to like the Facebook page of Like Father, Like Daughter. And I'll see you guys later. Bye.